an organization of residents of Princeton Borough and Township with diverse backgrounds, interests, and talents. Princeton Future has grown out of a concern that much of the planning and proposed development of the critical downtown spaces have been proceeding in an unconnected manner. The aim of Princeton Future is to assist the municipal authority to take a forward-looking and more comprehensive approach. Investigation and consultation undertaken by Princeton Future indicates that these objectives are achievable with good planning. More detailed studies and further involvement of all concerned parties are, however, clearly called for.
I think we're going to get started. Everyone can take a seat so that we can get updated. Let's say, because he wasn't here at the previous land use discussions. Mr. Kilgore from the packet, and you'll be able to ask questions if you would like.
And I, hate to go off a little bit on a side subject here, but a while ago you had a discussion section, Princeton Future, on the north end of Witherspoon Street in the B1 zone. And I know the Princeton Future was discussing that particular area, and I thought it was important that the property owners of the B1 zone get together and talk about what our thoughts were about the neighborhood. Many of us have been there many years. We have properties there. We care about the neighborhood. We care about the future of Princeton. A number of years ago, there was a move afoot to change the zone in the neighborhood, and we got together and petitioned the township committee not to change the zone, and we were successful in doing so. We felt the mixed use, commercial, residential, retail was very positive for the area and continues to be so. Several of my neighbors are here. We had a meeting in March. There was about 15, 16 of us. The vast majority, again, restated our desire to keep the neighborhood as it is, but to work with Princeton Future and other groups to try to improve the landscape, the lighting, the sense of community that exists in Princeton, because we're very proud of our neighborhood, as many of you are here in this room today. So I'd like to read this note, a petition. It was signed by 14 property owners representing 24 parcels in the B1 zone. Only one individual, actually two individuals would not sign, one person who was involved in the political community said he could not. Another individual basically wished, I believe, to have the zone changed for possible residential use. But let me read our letter, and it's, again, we're here to help, but we wanted to restate our feeling, and then some others in the audience might want to add to this. Ladies and gentlemen, the group Princeton Future and others have recently discussed the future of Witherspoon Street in Princeton Borough and Princeton Township. Much of that discussion is focused on the neighborhood mix of housing, commercial and retail use with the trends in the neighborhood. Of significant concern is the future use of the University Medical Center at Princeton site, which may become vacant with a move by the medical center to another location. There have been discussion of zoning, the streetscape, lighting, quality of life, and the future direction of the Witherspoon Street neighborhood. This community discussion about Witherspoon Street will continue as it should. The purpose of this letter is to make it clear that the majority of the Witherspoon Street property owners in the B1 zone in Princeton Township strongly support the current zoning and a vibrant and attractive Witherspoon Street community. The B1 zone on Witherspoon Street is one of the very few communities that allows a mixture of residential, commercial, and retail business in one zone. This mixed-use zone has allowed residential, commercial, and retail uses to flourish for decades. In addition, current zoning laws strictly limit business uses with building size limits and off-street parking requirements. Hence, there are many controls on the current B1 use. About 15 years ago, the Princeton Regional Planning Board attempted to rezone the B1 zone on Witherspoon Street to residential use. At that time, the majority of the B1 property owners successfully petitioned Princeton Township Committee not to change the zone. On March 9, 2005, the majority of B1 Witherspoon Street property owners and their representatives met and restated unequivocally their desire and belief that the current B1 zone on Witherspoon Street is working and should remain unchanged. At that meeting was further agreed by the vast majority in attendance that a petition letter to be drafted to emphatically state that the overwhelming majority of the B1 zone Witherspoon Street property owners request that the current B1 zone on Witherspoon Street remain in place. This letter serves as that petition, which is being sent to the Board of Advisors of Princeton Future, the Princeton Regional Planning Board, and the Princeton Township Committee. The names and signatures of the petitioning B1 property owners or their representatives are listed below, along with the addresses of their respective properties in the B1 zone. Again, there's 14 signatures representing 24 property owners. Be glad to answer any questions you might have, and maybe some of the other representatives here would like to speak.
Could you bring a map that shows us exactly where these properties are and what you are asking us to consider?
We don't, I have, back in the office, there's a sketch, the B1 zone. Part of the area includes the school and the municipality. These are the individual private property owners within that zone. And sure, we can provide, whatever information you need. But basically, these individuals are the majority of the property owners on that site.
Is this a question to Mr. Kilgore?
Yep.
Is the mixed use that is currently zoned, as you just quoted, is there a ratio, as it is in the borough, 60%?
No.
However, okay, then if it is not, at what point will the powers to be in the township say this is enough business? Because if there is no limit, it could creep into total commercial.
I think that it's very difficult to add. You have to have on-site parking. There's certain side yard requirements. It's very, very difficult to convert a building. We've gone through it a number of times, and we've tried to make it fit in. We try to make it fit in with the community. We have off-site parking adjacent to us we've been able to use. We've renovated those buildings. They no longer have kitchens or anything like that, but we want to keep the look and feel. And in the back, for example, we have a picnic area in some of those houses that we own. It's green, we have trees, we have garden. If those were residential, you would have asphalt, you'd have parking, you'd have cars parked there, you'd have, so I think the look and feel on the outside, like some of this is residential, but in the back you have a green space, picnic tables, sunlight, trees, garden, this kind of effect to try to balance some of the other asphalt, cement things that you have in the neighborhood. So anybody that converts, you have to provide the parking, and I believe it's one spot for every 150 or 200 square feet of square foot space. So a small house, you've got to have 6 to 8 to 10 parking spaces based on the square footage that you're trying to convert. So I think that's quite restrictive. And again, I think there's been different commercial uses on the street. I think some of these houses were commercial before, went back to residential, some have gone the other way. And I don't know what percentage is commercial now, but it's the amount of residential is is reduced than what it was before. But I think to convert further by individuals because they don't have the adequate parking. A lot of these lots are very small. They have to get a variance, and I think the town is very restrictive on giving variances for a change in use. Because if you have a residential house in the B1 zone, you have to go before the township officials, in the case of the B1 zone, to get approval to change to business use. You have to show parking, you have to show other requirements to do that. And so you do have controls in place that are quite restrictive and quite appropriate.
Okay, are there any more questions? I think we have one, a comment, please. One last one, and then we have to move on to our next.
I'm Jeff Fury again. I was part of that meeting at the thing. Just there were 15 people, as you stated, Jim, at the meeting, in which I would categorize 14 of those were actual full property owners on the street. One was a person that lived directly behind this street at their residence. Now, out of those 14, there were 11, I term them investors. They own the property, they do not live in the property. There was, and you have these investors, some of them live as far away as California. Then you have one property owner who also was an investor, because he has 3 units on the property, so-called mix. And then you had 2 residential people that actually lived there. So you got to understand then why they would do it, how they felt about it, on how they voted. The other thing I'd like to note on this was that I think with the one person that was objectionable to keeping it in its present zoning, it was not objectionable to have it as a mixed use. Similar, his feeling was to maintain that zoning that the borough had, a mixed zoning. Commercial being residential, being office or retail on the first floor with residential on the second. Make it continuous use down the Witherspoon Street. With the parking issue, if you did that sort of thing, you know that your needs are not quite as great for parking, because you have the people that are living there would use the same parking at nights that maybe the retail would use in the back. You have a little mixed use there.
Jeff, we're going to have to move on. We have some.
We could also say that in that this is going to follow in the next discussion, I think, a little bit.
Right.
And also that we have put commercial here. We're certainly hearing it. I think that over traffic, our concern, which is that the B1 allows it to be all B, even though in fact there are restrictions. So you're an important part, of course, of that street. So we're listening.
Okay, I think we're going to, yeah, we have to go on to Kevin. Can you come down and?
I'd like to thank Jim. It's very important that the citizens of the town come and get heard. And you've been very polite and courteous, and all points of view forge a community consensus. And thank you. This didn't seem to work, Kevin.
Good morning. We looked at the length of Witherspoon Street in terms of some specific design issues now. What I'm going to talk about are some goals and possibilities for the redesign and improvement of the actual public space along Witherspoon Street, the sidewalks, the street corridor, including such details as the trees, tree canopies, utilities, the parking, driveway cuts, street cuts, and certain adjacencies that occur from school districts and institutional uses that bring different groups of pedestrians and bicyclists up and down the street throughout the day. We are going to look at some possibilities for addressing what is quite honestly the shabby condition of the sidewalk and curb network on Witherspoon Street today, and want to see what are some of the physical possibilities that we could implement relatively easily and relatively quickly to make an immediate visual improvement in the street and make an improvement in the quality of life of people who walk up and down the street and park along the street. As you all know, and we've said countless times, Witherspoon Street has a long history in our community, and I wanted to show you this engraving from about 130 years ago, where Witherspoon Street was a primary component of the town's circulation system. You can see the intact neighborhoods already in place along Witherspoon Street. You can see the emergence of downtown clusters, but you see that there are some little commercial clusters along different blocks up and down Witherspoon Street. Witherspoon Street has vibrant, extraordinary, ongoing history for hundreds of years. This is a map just calling out the specific area that we're going to address in terms of our detailing. That yellow line follows Witherspoon Street from Nassau Street out to Route 206. And you can see specific neighborhoods, institutions. From this aerial view, you can see that large amount of land mass is held by the cemetery, held by the medical center, and is held by the Community Park Municipal Pool Township Municipal Building Complex. Alan Holly and I have worked on this, and we just needed a little segue from that drawing to the next image. So looking specifically at Witherspoon Street, this is a view standing at pretty much the Arts Council intersection of Paul Robeson and Wiggins and Witherspoon. And looking to the north, you see some of the salient details there, which are the tree canopies covering the street. You see the utility poles duking it out with the tree canopies covering the street. You see pedestrians crossing the street. You see sidewalks on both sides. If we turn around and look south into the central business district, slightly different visual character. The buildings take greater prominence in the streetscape. The trees are of different quality, the beautiful Bradford pears that are at their most luxurious at this very moment, the things that make this two-block section really special, don't create the type of canopy that the mature oaks and maples and plane trees create to the north of the intersection. And there's a great deal more traffic, and pedestrians and traffic have a little more territorial battles going on in central business district. And maybe a little more sky plane, a little less sky plane. It depends on how much the trees fill up from winter to summer. We first did some analytical work, and Holly is going to just take you through some of the things that we determined as we walked the neighborhood are relevant existing conditions. Why relevant existing conditions are important to us is because of the history of the neighborhood and the history of the street. Existing conditions indicate to us how the buildings and how the sidewalks and streets have been used over the past 200 years. And as designers, we can analyze these dimensions, these elevations, these sections, and we can look for solutions to really localized problems. Problems, for example, of there are a number of locations along Witherspoon Street that have steep slope problems at the curb. There are a number of areas where the curb itself is in total disrepair and collapsed flush with the asphalt surface. There are a number of areas where the planting strip, which is the piece of attempt at lawn between the sidewalk and the curb, have totally not excessive, due to the amount of pedestrian foot traffic traveling up and down the sidewalk that kills any grass or anything that ever got planted in that strip. There are a number of utility poles at unfortunate locations. There are a number of trees that are in wonderful, extraordinary shape that need to be enhanced and preserved. There are a number of trees that have been chopped and butchered and damaged, and you can see now they're on the downhill slope. So through design and through looking at these details, we came up with some consistency of how the street presently works. Just push that button right there.
There it is. So these sections start pretty much down near the town hall, and what we did is we moved up the street into town. And there's a very different character at the north end of the street. It's much more open. It's less defined by buildings on both sides of the street, particularly when you're at the parking lot at Community Park Pool. Big open space on the west side of the road, and then because of the fire station and the garages, you have parking and a big open space on the right side of the road. What I tried to show is the relationship of the trees. These are the pine trees that at one point blocked the cars that parked at Community Park Pool. They're now pretty tall, and you actually see under and see the parked cars anyway. And the curves and the planting strips and the little details that, even though I live in that neighborhood, I walk down the street and I actually don't consciously register this stuff. So this was a good exercise for me to get out there and record what was happening along the street. And it allowed me to see stuff that I'd never noticed before. For instance, one thing being that the parked cars are on the east side of the street in the township, and they're on the west side of the street in the borough. Just a funny thing that doesn't necessarily have any implications, but if you're thinking of putting in a bike path, it might matter, which is something that we'll get to towards the end. But what I think you're beginning to see as we're moving towards town is you start to see on the left a house with a porch, with a front lawn, then a sidewalk, then a planting bed with a tree, then the street. And as we get closer into town, that becomes the norm. And that is one of the differences that you see in section between Witherspoon Street and the downtown, where you have the buildings coming up to the edge of the sidewalk without that transition. So the sense of houses, porches, front yard, and then sidewalk, and then street is kind of what we determined as the structure of Witherspoon Street. And what we're hoping to show in the following slides is where there's places where that structure gets messed up, where there's mistakes and things that need to be amended.
Thanks, Holly. So the spatial character and the quality of street experience changed dramatically moving from township into the borough. The street spatial character narrows as the buildings pull closer to the street line. Here you see in her sketch hospital, the existing tall hospital building, and how it looms over the street section. And that continues as the street actually starts to narrow. Here's the section down by the Clay Street Learning Center, where the houses start to develop a steep slope on the eastern side of the street. And same thing starts to happen as we move closer into town on the western side of the street, especially down here at right below Tory Lane, across from where the new Chinese restaurant's being rebuilt. The old Chinese restaurant's being rebuilt into a new Chinese restaurant. And here again we see a series of slope edge conditions. This is the street bed, a steep slope up to a sidewalk, which then has a series of steps going up from there into the residence. There's a couple of commercial locations like Jefferson's, for example, where off of the street. They have a paved parking lot of some sort. Some of these parking lots are in use, and some of these paved areas in the front of the buildings that had been parking lots are no longer in use. And finally, as we get close into town, the cemetery occupies the eastern side of Witherspoon Street, and the western side has a series, generally at corners, of churches and private residences in between, and in most cases the churches have a sort of paved sidewalk area in front of them for gathering when churches are grouped or in use on the weekends or evenings, and those are areas that we want to enhance and improve a bit. So we're going to start here at this corner right up here and now turn around and walk our way back up the street heading north, looking at some images and some suggestions. One of our first goals is that we want to establish a very healthy environment for the street trees along Witherspoon Street. We want to create in our new sidewalk detailing a way where the existing mature trees can be ensured of as long a survival as possible, and that the new trees that get planted either to replace trees that have died or to fill in certain gaps in areas that we feel are missing, those new trees have the best chance of surviving for 100 years down the road, so they can replace the mature canopy that presently exists. It is a very unfortunate and sad fact to us that trees don't last forever. As much as we want, the trees are part of an evolving, ongoing organic process. They're planted, they grow, they're mature, we love them, and sometimes, for various reasons, it's at their own cause or nature's cause, they have to depart and move on. We should do everything we can to save the mature ones we have and to promote a healthy life for the new ones that we plant. On the west side of Witherspoon, in front of the Arts Council, already planned is to widen that inbound lane with a right-hand turn lane that will allow people to turn from Witherspoon onto Paul Robeson, making a right-hand turn without backing up people going through or trying to turn left. In that right-hand turn lane, we propose that there be installed a bus stop. That's largely the condition that exists today, that the bus stops in the traffic lane. It will be slightly improved when the bus pulls over and stops in a right-hand turn lane to allow through traffic to continue down the street. We advocate that the sidewalks now be continued to the curb throughout what I might call the southern half of Witherspoon Street. Throughout much of what is the borough, we advocate that the sidewalks be continued to the curb and this planting strip here be eliminated. We actually advocate that the sidewalks be a media that supports the growing of trees and doesn't fight tree roots. We actually don't want to use poured in place concrete. We want to use a unit paver that's designed like, imagine a little brick walkway. However, these bricks are pretty sophisticated because they have gaps in them of a small 1/4 of an inch around their edges, and they allow water to filter through the sidewalk. So they allow water to get to tree roots underneath the sidewalk without completely blocking. If we carried the sidewalk all the way to the curb in a way that would not allow water to feed the tree roots, we will be diminishing the tree's chance of survival, not enhancing the tree's chance of survival. So we believe that the sidewalk should have unit paver, that the material underneath the sidewalks be of a structural compacted fill that allows tree roots to grow in an organic media, but the structural fill allows the sidewalk to be stable, level, and as trees grow, as you've all noticed, one of the great problems is tree roots. As they come up to the surface and move their way out from the tree and move their way to the curb, the sidewalks get lifted and crack and break. With this type of system, what you need to do simply is pull up the pavers that are immediately adjacent to the new roots, grade them with a little compacted dust, and you can modify that sidewalk to accommodate the tree in its growth pattern without having to rip out the concrete sidewalks, chop at the tree roots, try to get the sidewalk back to where it used to be, and eventually cause damage to the tree. So here you see across the street, in front of the cemetery, on the eastern side of Witherspoon, conditions where we have an extraordinary line of majestic trees along the eastern edge. We believe the trees along the eastern edge, we should do everything we can to save every possible one, and we don't see many reasons why we can't. We do believe when the street is repaved and reconstructed that this curb should be raised up to 7 inches, and that around the trees, the curb should be dropped down flush with the street bed and brought back up a few feet beyond the root base to not chop at the bases of those trees. If we cut at the roots, or if we pour hot asphalt right on top of them, we will undoubtedly cause damage to these trees. So we want to, again, bring the sidewalk detailing to the curb where we can't manage to grow any grass, and we want to enhance the area around the trees so that they have space to grow. New trees that we plant, we don't want to plant in this little 18-inch strip on the edge, which we call the grass strip. We actually want to plant new trees farther away from the street curb, so as those trees grow up, their root bases will not try to do this tug of war with the street bed. So in some areas along the street, Witherspoon Street is crowned roughly at Quarry. And crowning, I mean, that's the high point. So it moves uphill to that point and then actually turns around, slopes down a little bit, and then down around Robeson, turns around, starts gently sloping back uphill to Nassau Street. In this area, you see the significant steep slope issue here on the west side of the street. Not quite so bad here that we couldn't simply reconstruct these along the grades that exist. Notice along the right-hand side of the image, or the western side of the street, notice how much the utility lines have won out the battle with the trees. Notice how healthy these trees are. Notice how much trouble the few trees that exist in here are having. We're going to show you some more slides and talk to you what we think we should do about that in a moment. This is one particular area, and I might want you all to look over here on a little sketch we've made. This is a particular area between McLean and Quarry, or more correctly maybe Quarry and Tory Lane, where there's a series of, I think there are 4 commercial businesses on the western side of the street, and 2 on the eastern side, and some offices on the eastern side. And we have a really especially bad condition along here of getting close to a 2-foot drop-off from sidewalk to street bed. We have steps of various buildings pushing into the public right-of-way because it's so steep in there, there's no way they can get up to their first floor. And we have curb cuts that basically bottom out every single vehicle that ever attempts to turn in there. We have 2 strategies for this problem. Strategy number 1, we've drawn over here on this drawing. And if you guys look over here, the site we're talking about is right there between Quarry, and that's Shirley Court, and Tory Lane is coming in right there. For that one little block, we propose one of 2 things. We propose either that we extend this curve out 8 feet and eliminate parking for 100 feet there, and allow this sidewalk to widen and slope gently at a slope that anybody can accommodate into what is effectively a neck down on Witherspoon Street. Neck down sort of brings me a back-ended way into one of our other goals, which is we heard from numerous people that they want Witherspoon Street traffic to slow down and be more aware of children that are crossing the street, of adults. We don't want to run over the adults either. Of everybody, I should say, who's crossing the street. We want Witherspoon Street to be a little more friendly for pedestrians and develop a way to slow down the traffic without necessarily putting in traffic lights or maybe even stop signs. When we posed in our workshops to people, well, if you want traffic to slow down, what if I put a light here and here? They invariably said, oh, I don't really want that. I just want everyone to drive 20 miles an hour. Well, the way to do that is at certain points of the street to narrow it or change its direction or create a visual interference through a heavily striped crosswalk or some crosswalk embedded lights in the roadway as they've done down at McCarter. Little strategies like that that will force drivers to be more aware and therefore slow down to interpret all of these narrowing signals they're being given. So we think we might could accomplish two goals here. We could take one little block here, and we're going to actually propose that two more places as we move down Witherspoon to the north. Take one little area, narrow the street down, solve a series of sectional problems, and create, in front of the businesses, in a little block area where there's a lot of commercial going on, create a little more development that are standing on the sidewalk can stand out of the way of the people who are walking up and down the sidewalk. Right now at this sidewalk, if 3 people are hanging out in front of the bodega and 2 people want to walk past, somebody has to do a little dance. And it would be nice if there were a space where people could stand and chat and talk with their buddies. People that come and go from the Chinese restaurant, when it was up and running, we saw a huge amount of traffic coming and going out of there in the evenings. That would happen directly across the street from this little detail. So that's our first location of really suggesting that we change this. Now, option number 2, if we don't change this and feel that we don't want to eliminate the parking, is we think we should install a railing along this side of the sidewalk. Along the outside edge of the sidewalk, we think we should install a railing and actually cut this little piece of sloped asphalt out and create an 18-inch flat space that's level with the curb that allows the people who park there to open the passenger door of their vehicle. Right now, these people can't open the passenger door of their vehicle. Well, actually, that pickup truck can. But passenger cars can't open their door. They're parked there because it slams into the steep slope of the asphalt curb there. The way to solve that would be to create 18 inches of level with the curb and then a little mini wall, and we'd have to have a railing alongside that so people didn't fall into that little pit. And that railing would continue possibly from here, McLean is behind, excuse me, Quarry is behind me. That railing would continue down to roughly the location at Tory Lane. So those are 2 strategies for starting to mitigate some of these steep slope issues through redetailing the sidewalk. Here you see a similar condition of danger coming out from the little grocery store. Complete destruction of the curb, and this is really actually a very dangerous thing to try to navigate. It's even a little worse in front of Forest Pharmacy. The root base of the existing trees have caused the slabs to lift up, and now this whole sidewalk actually slopes back into the door of Forest Pharmacy. So any heavy rain, what's going to happen is water's going to run down here. Now, it is sloping a little bit this way, but it's also pitching from here to there. So there's just a dangerous location of water, and really not a problem in the summer, but in the winter, it's a big ice problem where ice builds up. So it's bad for the business owner, and it's bad for pedestrians walking along the street. When we rebuild the street and sidewalk, we want to make better accommodations for our trees to survive. Said that before, and it really bears repeating countless times. This is looking now back into town, looking south from where we propose would be the other end of this slope condition. Right here, where this new building has been built, they actually cut the sidewalk, the slope out in here, and pitched it more evenly to the street. Pretty much here at Tory Lane, this problem solves itself for a while. Now, looking across the street in this neighborhood, again, we see these trees along the eastern side that have done what they can to survive, and we want to do everything we can to protect these trees and save them. So that doesn't allow us to raise the street a great deal in there. Some of these slope issues, you say, well, Kevin, why can't I just raise the street up a bit and then I'll come closer to the height of the existing sidewalk? And our problem is across the street, we don't have that steep slope condition as bad as we do on the western side of the street. So we can only raise the street bed, quite honestly, a few inches to gain a little elevation at these curves. This is looking at the intersection of Lytle and Witherspoon. Clay Street is to our back here. On this map, we're actually at a location right there, looking at that intersection. And again, we see this condition along the western side of the street of extreme disrepair, bordering on danger. However, we also see the remnants of the conditions that Holly explained: the front porch, the front garden, the steps up to the house, and the tree. We, obviously this type came from a time when there was a much lower pedestrian traffic up and down the street, when people would actually sit on their porch and say hello to somebody walking up and down the street, and it would take you 10 minutes to walk from corner to corner because you'd stop and chat with a few people along the way. That seems to happen less and less now, but possibly if we improve the pedestrian world and convince some property owners to restore their gardens a little bit, possibly we could bring that back to the neighborhood. And we think that would improve the quality of life in the neighborhood, is developing a pedestrian life that is vibrant, the people in the neighborhood watching over their streets. So we have to make the streets a wonderful place to be in, to want to stand in the evenings after dinner and chat with your friends. They shouldn't be minefields of ankle-twisting danger. There are a handful of commercial properties that started as residential properties that have flipped to business, and we would like to suggest to some of the business owners that they make some attempts to dress up their formerly front yard through strategies of planters and gardens and detailing that might help restore some of this character from the adjacent still residential uses to the business properties next door. So this is a beautiful building in wonderful shape, has architect tenants, it's an office building. For a small amount of money, the curb appeal and beauty of this as people walk past it and enter it could be enhanced dramatically by creating a garden space off of our sidewalk. There are a series of what I call ghost curb cuts that enter into places where people used to park that no longer park. For example, in this building, people park around back. We'd like to see these removed. We'd like to see the sidewalk detailing continue to the curb. We'd like to see the curb restored and repaired and brought up in elevation. And we'd like to talk these people into enhancing the front of their building with some types of plantings. If they don't want to take out the asphalt and plant something in some dirt, maybe some planters with pots that they maintain. Maintenance is a big issue. It's not something we can really address as initial designers and installers, but the whole neighborhood is in need of ongoing maintenance that would be supported by the local residents, and I think people would be more willing to take care of something they found was beautiful and special to them than generic things that are breaking and falling apart. So our hope is that the improvements are really the first phase of people taking ongoing care of the public street corridor and respecting that as part of their space as well as the town space. We propose a series of bus or jitney stops along Witherspoon. 3 of the ones we propose are already there, so that wasn't really too hard for us to figure those out. We want to shift around a couple locations on the others. And we're sort of curious to hear what people believe should happen at a bus stop. We would like to imagine that down the road, the township and the borough would institute a jitney service that will take people through the town and the borough to various commercial districts with greater ease so they don't have to get out of their cars. And personally, I imagine that's going to be some kind of a loop that comes down Witherspoon and goes somewhere across Valley or Terhune and goes somewhere up and down Harrison and goes somewhere back down into town along Nassau, and might have various sub-routes from that, but I can envision that quadrangle being the basic route. So along Witherspoon Street, we want to propose 3 jitney bus stops on the outbound or northbound lane and 3 on the southbound lane. This one is the existing one south of Franklin. We actually want to move that half a block to the north into new park space. We want to have one that is presently across from the Arts Council in front of the cemetery. We actually want to move that one back to right here in front of this plaza, which would be located right there at that point. So the first one is there. The second one would be here on the opposite side of Franklin, actually down a little bit in front of the hospital site, and I'll explain that in a second. And the last one would be down Witherspoon Street in front of the Valley Road 369 Witherspoon former Township Board of Education building. On the inbound side, we want to propose the first one is at the Community Park bus stop, which is already in place. That's where it is, no change of location. The second one we want to propose will actually be roughly to my left of this image, will be at the intersection of Franklin and Witherspoon on the southbound side of Witherspoon. And the last one we want to propose is the one that's presently proposed for in front of the Arts Council. So 3 stops along Witherspoon Street outbound and 3 stops inbound for use by New Jersey Transit. In some cases, such as Community Park, for use by the morning school buses, and for use by what we hope will someday be the town jitney bus service. Questions to be considered is how much architecture, how much structure, how much stuff do you need around a bus stop? Do you need a shelter, a bench, reading light, ottoman, chair, table? This is all up in the air. Obviously, the more stuff, the more impact on the people that live immediately adjacent. Wouldn't be a big issue right here, but might be an issue, say, at the community park site. So we haven't really developed any standards for that. We're interested in feedback. We have a couple other goals that we set out and that I've sort of outlined. In addition to our sidewalk goal where we want to mitigate the steep slopes, we want to improve pedestrian crossings across Witherspoon Street. We want to amplify certain areas where there is a preponderance of school-age children crossing in the morning and the afternoon. And one of the primary intersections that we've looked at is here at Clay Street Learning Center and Franklin, this intersection here. You'll see over in our little sketch here, we actually want to propose a neck down just north of Clay, right in here. We want to narrow the street. At this point, parking is still on the western side of Witherspoon in the borough. So parking happens along there, and it actually changes right here. So we actually want to neck this down here and do a heavily striped crosswalk, which we show right there, over to this side of the street. And that's actually a main intersection in the morning for kids heading over to the middle school and the high school. There's a lot of pedestrian and bike traffic through there. So we want to calm this intersection down. We want to slow people down there. And we want to make it especially pedestrian friendly at that spot. But also, this is the beginning of a zone that we want to create heading now north. And we want to create a linear park along the edge of Witherspoon Street, which we have tentatively, idealistically dubbed Unity Park, because this park will span from the borough to the township and will unite the two across its present boundaries in front of the hospital site. The hospital site, for all of its density, has one slightly nice feature, which is a 20-foot existing setback to the existing buildings. Most of the other properties along the street are within 5 to 10-foot setbacks, and historically, the older the building, the closer to the street it tends to be. We actually want to convince either the present owner or the future owner of the site to keep possibly that 20-foot setback, in addition to our existing 11-foot right-of-way from back of sidewalk to curb, and We want to actually push out into the street, a neck down, across the eastern edge of Witherspoon Street, the entire length of the medical center property. So what we want to create is a roughly 40-foot band by the length of 2 blocks of space that's planted with a heavy canopy of shade trees and benches and places where people can come and sit and congregate and collect in an area that is central to the length, the trip down Witherspoon Street, and also will be the frontal space to any one of these various schemes that we see developed for the hospital site. We want to create a bit of a buffer that mitigates the new development going on, whether it's the remainder of what's there or anything new that's envisioned, and we want to stitch together the world of people that are walking through here and walking across from the Harris neighborhood to the Johns Witherspoon neighborhood, that are going down Lee and Birch to the neighborhood businesses in there. We want to create a park for them. We can't carve out a few lots. We can't push over a number of buildings. It's really a subtle proposal to take the existing sidewalk and enhance it from a pedestrian movement zone to a space where people would pause and rest. This might have a fountain in it. It might have special gardens. It might have neighborhood gardens. It might have a children's sandbox or swing. We don't really know exactly, but it's a piece, it's a park that starts to tie together the surrounding edges and the changed neighborhood immediately behind it.
Can I help them along?
Oh, am I running out of time?
Well,
Yeah,
we're past
I'm
11.
getting hooked here. All right. When we move into the township section, looking north now, that's Birch Street right there, we actually want to change our sidewalk detailing and maintain the grass strip to some extent where we can, because we have a pretty consistent grass strip character that seems to have a chance of survival, and we have an ongoing residential character there, so we actually want to make that shift as we move down. Looking at Henry, this would be the north end of our imagined Unity Park, looking up now towards the really the township section, and here is where the parking shifts to the east side of the street in the township. So what our little Unity Park thing has done in a traffic calming way is shift the 2 lanes of traffic that in the township run on the western edge of Witherspoon to the borough side, where the 2 lanes of traffic run on the eastern edge of the street. Our little park is a subtle way to neck down, slow down the traffic, and correct them and shift them over to the other side of the street. Inside that park are 2 little pull-off bus stops, where the bus stops, our number 2 stops, inbound and outbound, can pull out of the lane of traffic and let people on and off the bus, and then pull back into the traffic lane. So here we actually think these neighborhoods just need a little repair, a little fixing, a little maintenance of the curb and sidewalk detailing, and we really want to continue this condition of sidewalk and planning strip. Up here at Community Park, we want to, again, protect these canopies. We want to maintain the existing bus stop location. We do want to propose one change at Community Park School, which is we want to change the direction of traffic in Community Park's internal circulation drive. The problem we found from many people in the neighborhood is as buses and parents come in the morning to drop off their children, and as they come in the afternoon to drop off pick up their children, traffic stacks out of this little lane and backs down Witherspoon Street. And Witherspoon Street, as narrow as it is, can't afford to have, for any length of time, stopped vehicles in the traffic lane. If we turn the traffic around and bring them down Lee or Birch and come in at the end, the extension of John into the backside of Community Park School, We can then let traffic back up for the better part of 3 blocks before it ever gets in anybody's way. It will keep that traffic out of the on Witherspoon Street, and it will allow the traffic guard at our final neck down location, which we propose to be right, where did we put it, Holly? Right below?
With a crosswalk.
Where the crosswalk is at Geo. Is that what we did?
No.
In front of the school.
Oh, in front of the school, right in there. Where we have a crosswalk and a crossing guard, we want to do a large crosswalk. The crossing guard could to some extent keep an eye on the traffic that's coming out of Community Park as well as Witherspoon traffic. That's a small shift we want to suggest there. And here is actually that location that I was just talking about. So we want vehicles to exit here as opposed to enter here. We want to enhance this crosswalk and set it up such that the crossing guard can pay a little better control. I think some of you might have heard there have been a couple of accidents recently in crosswalk locations of school children getting hit by a car. We need to do everything we can to prevent that from ever happening. And really here we want to preserve those row of bike pines. We want to improve some of the detailing here. And we want to connect to the bike location, the present Geo pathway that runs heading over to Jefferson and Moore. We actually want to enhance that system and create an improved way for bicyclists to use this intersection here and pedestrians. And we actually want to set up another crosswalk location here and really suggest off our study an enhanced system of circulation that connects Moore, Jefferson, Harris, across into Witherspoon here, where there's a significant amount of children and pedestrian circulation. Again, some of these curb details we want to improve, and here's the existing Valley Road stuff. We want to protect these trees. We want to add as much green as we can to the township side of these parking lots, although we realize a lot of those people need those parking lots, and there isn't a great deal of hope for removing the macadam. But we could maybe improve this curb edge location where there is some delineation of entrance and exit and some clearer system of where cars shouldn't be parking on the sidewalk and cars shouldn't be, the sidewalk shouldn't be given completely over to a vehicle facility. We feel the utility lines are a major problem on the street, and we want to advocate that the overhead electric, cable, and TV lines be buried under the new sidewalk running down the western side of Witherspoon Street. That's the area where many of the tree canopies have been butchered and slaughtered by the shear pen tree trimmer people. They allow the utility lines to take precedence, and quite honestly, these trees are on the downhill slope of their life. We would like to see the utilities buried. We understand that's an expensive endeavor. However, we want to point out the least expensive time ever to do it is when the street is being rebuilt. And when the street is being rebuilt, and the sidewalks are being rebuilt, and the curbs are being rebuilt, the additional cost to take the utilities off the poles and put them underground is not as high as it would be if you started to do it as a standalone project. So this represents a once in 30 to 40 year opportunity for us to accomplish this goal. And while it will be a financial difficulty to pull this off, we believe it's very, very, very important to the quality of the visual character of the street, and we believe it's critical to the life of the future new trees, the shade canopy trees that we plant along the western edge of the street. It's critical to their survival down the road that they don't have to fight it out with the tree surgeons to that eventual fate. Oh, and also, we believe that the street lamps on that, I'm sorry. We also believe that these street lamps could light the street sporadically, which are these old highway institutional, federal transit, Cobra lights. We believe they are the wrong light for the street. We believe the street doesn't have adequate light at a level of crosswalks and sidewalks, and we want to suggest a lighting strategy that will bring the lights down closer to people and light sidewalks and street crosswalks and not cast an overall dull glow in everybody's windows and very little amount actually making it down to the street where we need the light. We believe that it's very hard to add a bike lane to Witherspoon Street given the narrowness of the existing street. We believe the trade-offs would be to eliminate traffic lane or eliminate parking. We can't really justify eliminating either of those. It seems to make no sense to have Witherspoon go one way or the other, and it seems to make no sense to eliminate parking along Witherspoon Street. Those are the sacrifices we would have to make to have a dedicated bike lane. We do, however, believe there's a great opportunity down Jefferson and Moore Street to create an inbound bike lane on Jefferson that can be striped on the side of Jefferson where there's no parking, and an outbound lane on Moore where it can be striped on the side of Moore where there's no parking. The bicycles would be far safer going in and out of town in that location, and then cutting across to Witherspoon at a series of cross points, the Geo Path or along Wiggins, where we have a 6-foot paved curb today, presently in place along the cemetery all the way down to Jefferson, which is actually adequate to allow bicycles for those 2 blocks to travel on the sidewalk. And finally, we would like at a couple points here where there are gates into the cemetery to reach out to the owners of the cemetery and suggest to them that maybe there's a way that we could work together with you to open up these gates into the cemetery and to enhance the cemetery as a level of public park. There's a great history in this country and in Europe of cemeteries being places where people will promenade and walk and go in the evening and visit the departed and ponder the meaning of life. And this cemetery is completely sealed off except for a little entrance right back there. We understand the cemetery has some concerns about security in the public, but we think there's a way we could reach